Hey guys, how's it going? It's Andy from Magoo Investing. Happy Wednesday. For the upcoming month, I know it is, the 31st, it's not the 1st, so it's not the beginning of the month, but for the next month, I'm going to be talking pretty much exclusively during the week about green energy stocks and renewable energy stocks. And the main reason behind that is, in my mind, they are the best stocks to be buying for the next 5 to 10 years. And the reason behind that is we've been seeing a lot of changes in the way the government has been kind of discussing the future plans for investing in green energy and renewable energy. And it's put a lot of excitement into these types of stocks. And they were some of the top performing stocks of 2020. And with the recent news about the Biden infrastructure project that came out yesterday, where they're going to be investing $2 trillion in infrastructure plans to rebuild 20,000 miles of roads, rebuild 10 bridges, and the elimination of lead pipes, and some investment in some EV stuff. There's been a lot of excitement about the potential of investing in the green energy stocks. And I feel like it's an area that I have a decent amount of expertise. This is the largest part of my portfolio. When I look at my portfolio, which I'll talk about in tomorrow's video, I think around 50 to 60% of it could be considered renewable energy stocks. And so I'm pretty confident with that. I have a degree in marine biology, and I have a grad degree in wildlife management. So conservation and green energy, I feel like go hand in hand. So I'm going to be talking about that for the next month because I think there's a lot of very interesting opportunities out there, and they're not household names like an Amazon or an Apple or a Microsoft. Stuff that people are comfortable about. I feel like you need to go and find as much information as possible to really feel comfortable with it. So that's what we're going to be talking about for the next couple weeks. And so since I'm going to be talking about a bunch of renewable energy stocks, be sure to leave some of your favorite green energy stocks in the comment section down below, and I'll be sure to get to them by the end of this month. Also, disclaimer, this is not financial advice, and let's get right into it. So the reason I decided to talk about this now is that with the Biden administration coming in, they've had some lofty goals set to try to improve the carbon emissions going forward. Part of that plan comes with the idea of getting carbon-free power by 2035 and getting to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And so obviously this is a long way away, but if you're investing for something for the long run, I feel like this is the most set in stone bull case, considering that you have all of these countries coming out and saying that they want to get to these targets in the upcoming years. There's going to be a lot of money pouring into these types of companies. And that's why I've been investing in them heavily for the past year. So today I thought it would be probably the most logical way to start. Instead of talking about a specific stock, I think investing in specific stocks is great if it's in a well-known sector. When I look at tech stocks, you can look at something like a Peloton and you have a pretty good understanding of how the company runs. There's plenty of information out there, but the whole reason I think that the clean energy stocks on my channel have done well in the past couple months is because there's not a lot of great information out there. So I thought it would make a lot of sense to start with one of my favorite ETFs that follows the overall sector of just clean energy stocks overall. And so I'm going to start off by talking about why would you pick an ETF compared to an individual stock in this type of sector. When I go and look at a specific type of stock or sector that I want to buy in, I want to see how much information I can find and how comfortable I am with it overall. When I look at tech stocks, I'm incredibly comfortable looking at all these tech stocks, reading the numbers, and having a general understanding of how these companies run. But in my mind, the best way and best times to be buying ETFs are for sectors that you don't fully understand because it's tough to find information on some types of companies. Yes, you can find airline companies and be very confident. You don't need to buy, I forget what the airline ETF, I think it's Jet. They all have pretty funny names. But when I look at the green energy sector, there's so many companies that aren't as well known or well established. I think it does make a decent amount of sense to kind of look at some of the ETFs because not only does it allow you to not have to do as much research and try to pick a winner or a loser out of a very volatile sector, it allows you to benefit from the law of large numbers, where you're getting a lot of different companies that are going to average out to be less volatile than picking an individual stock. Say you pick a hydrogen fuel cell company, it does very well one year, could be up like 1,000%, like something what we've seen with Plug Power or FCEL, or you could pick a stock that's down 90% in 1 year. And if you're buying into an ETF that has 45 to 50 holdings, it's less likely that your position is going to explode because there's a lot less volatility when you buy an ETF. So the ETF that I wanted to talk about today, in my mind, is the most complete green energy ETF out there. There are some other options, and we'll talk about why I prefer this one over the others, but it's going to be the iShares Global Clean Energy ETF with the ticker symbol ICLN. When I usually look at the stocks that are getting traction and being discussed online, I see ICLN as being one of the most commonly discussed topics because it gives you a lot of exposure to companies that have been very exciting in the past but do offer a lot of risk. So right now the company is trading for $24 and it's down 15% on the year. But pretty much all of 2020 was fantastic for the green energy stocks overall. And when I put up the 1-year chart, you can see that it's up 153% in the past year, even though it has sold off pretty significantly from its recent highs back in January of this year. Looking back at this ETF, it first went public back in the middle of 2008. If you remember what happened during 2008 with the financial crisis, it was not a great time to get involved with the overall stock market. So it kind of makes sense why, the ETF sold off aggressively at the beginning. And when you think about investing in green energy, what is that, 14 years ago, 13 years ago? A little ambitious to be getting involved that early. There was not a lot of movement going in the right direction. Yes, you had some solar panel stuff, but there wasn't a lot of support from the overall government. And so I think the idea of investing in green energy makes a lot more sense now than it did back when this was created back in 2008. And when you look at its entire history, on average, it has returned negative 4% a year, but that is because of the major sell-off that happened right when it went public. So I don't think that that's too much of a worry. Whenever I talk about ETFs on this channel, one of the things that people mention has to do with expense ratios. And they always mention, why would you do this? It's just cutting into your overall profits. The whole idea of an expense ratio is it is a fee that you pay to the company that creates the ETF for managing the fund. And it can range between the percentages, but the longer that things have gone on, the lower the expense ratios have gotten. In general, mutual funds have higher expense ratios and they're paid as a fee. ICLN currently has an expense ratio of 0.46, which is pretty good when you compare it to something like the ARK ETFs have been incredibly popular that has an expense ratio for ARK-K, which is just their general innovation fund, of 0.75. I also do think it's fascinating that the ARK ETFs haven't come out with a green or even just like a solar type of innovation portfolio. They went to space first, but they didn't think about energy. Just kind of scratching my head a little bit when that went public yesterday for ARK-X, which is the space exploration ETF. But let's take a look at the largest positions that are held by ICLN, because one of my favorite things about ETFs is you can see exactly what they're holding. And when you look at the top holdings, it makes sense why some of them are so high of a weighting when it comes to the overall portfolio of the ETF. You have stuff like Plug Power, which has a 7.38% weighting. It makes sense because Plug Power is up like 1,000% in the past year. You can see similar things with Enphase Energy, which is 5.5%. And this is very common when you look at ETFs, especially the ARK ETFs, where Tesla was a major part of the ARK-K innovation portfolio just because it had such incredible returns in 2020 that, if you're holding it, it's going to be a larger part of your portfolio overall. So this makes sense. You see some common names in here like First Solar, ticker symbol FSLR. You have Meridian Energy, MEL. And then when you go to the second page, there are some ones that I've been seeing a lot of discussion about recently, and I'll be talking about them. I can give them their own videos eventually. You have stuff like Sunrun, which is ticker symbol RUN, and then you have Canadian Solar, which is ticker symbol CSIQ. These will all be talked about eventually, but these are the weighting for the first two pages. What is this? The top 20 holdings. And overall, I believe that ICLN has around 45 holdings, but there has been some discussion recently about things are going to get very volatile very quickly. The idea is that the index that this follows, the clean ETF, is going to be increasing the amount of stocks in that portfolio up to 77 from the current position of 45. What this means is that there's going to be a lot of buying and selling. It's going to be very interesting to see the effect it's going to have on these underlying stocks, because whenever an ETF holds it, this was the whole reason why Tesla had such a nice boost after it was included in the S&P 500, because there are requirements for ETFs that follow the S&P 500 to own a specific weighting of Tesla. So there was a big buying pressure there. And it's going to be very interesting to see what gets removed and what gets added. And in my mind, having more individual stocks in an ETF that's extremely volatile, like the renewable energy space, makes sense to me, but it's going to be very interesting to see the type of effect it has on the overall sector. And there hasn't been an official date. There's a semi-annual meeting in April that'll kind of determine what's going to happen. When that happens, I'll probably discuss it on this channel, but it is something to watch right now, just because the index is likely going to change, and we'll see the type of ripple it has in renewable energy stocks overall. And so I do want to mention that ICLN doesn't have any EV stocks in it, like a NIO or a Tesla. There have been some other renewable energy ETFs that do include those, but in my mind, I kind of see this as being a positive thing. You could make the argument, and I have made the argument in the past. I believe I made a video back in December talking about green energy stocks, and I did include NIO on there because it's the idea that you're going to be investing in green energy overall, but the way that you push the creation of the energy is you need to have a demand for the energy overall, and that's why the EVs have been so exciting and have likely pushed this space up significantly in the past year. But in my mind, when I'm buying into an ETF like ICLN, I like the idea that these are companies I don't have a lot of experience with. I'd feel way more comfortable just buying into something like a Tesla or a NIO on its own because there's so much information out there, and I'd like to have more flexibility of the type of weighting that it has in my overall portfolio. So there could be some arguments that, ICLN definitely missed out on some profits in 2020 because it doesn't include Tesla or NIO. If you believe that those are companies that are going to be doing extremely well and pushing the space forward, sure, you can buy them on your own, but I am kind of happy they're not included in that overall ETF because it does follow a lot of the companies that I probably wouldn't be buying on my own. So overall, this is going to be my first discussion about renewable energy stocks overall because I think it's the most exciting sector to be investing in overall. Yes, you do have the risks of investing in kind of a speculative type of sector because as of right now, green energy is only a fraction of what it's going to be in the upcoming years, because there's a lot of hope and expectations about what's going to happen in the upcoming years. But with the new infrastructure plan that's been released and the plans of getting to carbon neutral by 2050 and getting to carbon-free energy by 2035, and I think this is the most exciting sector to be a part of, and I do have some experience and some expertise based off of my college education, so kind of wanted to talk about that. Be sure to leave you guys' favorite renewable energy stocks and green energy stocks in the comment section down below, and I'll be sure to get to them by the end of this month. So I do like doing series. I did one in December where I talked about my favorite stocks of each sector, and I think this is my favorite sector overall, so I think it deserves a deep dive in all the different options you have out there, and I thought it only made sense to start with my favorite ETF for green energy stocks with ICLN. So let me know what you guys thought about ICLN, and let me know what you thought about the overall sector overall. Thanks for watching. I appreciate all the support, and I'll see you in the next video.